Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about AI in sales, buying signals, future sales tech. Awesome to see you all here. Happy Friday Eve. I agree, Katie. Happy Friday Eve, everyone. Best day of the week. We have a really nice mix of Doc customers, Koala customers, and new people joining us today. So welcome, everybody. And I'm Eric Doty. I do marketing at Doc. I'll be your host today. And I'm lucky to be joined by Tido and Alex, who are two amazing leaders in the GTM tech space. ChatGPT told me to call you guys amazing, so I did.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah, so first we have Tido Carriero. He's the CEO and co-founder of Koala. Prior to Koala, he led the product and engineering team at Segment from less than 5 million in ARR to up until their $3 billion acquisition from Twilio, which is super impressive. He also led engineering teams at Dropbox and Facebook. So Tido, can you introduce us really quickly to Koala and just explain the problem you're trying to solve for everyone?
Yeah, great to meet you all and excited to be here. And hopefully we get a lot of questions in the chat. Before I introduce, I just want to say I hope it's a lively set of questions, so please interrupt at any point. I'm Tido. I founded Koala about 3 years ago with two of our most senior engineers from Segment. I think we started just kind of appalled by the state of tooling for SDRs and BDRs. We did tons of interviews and we just couldn't look away from this problem of every SDR having like 17 tabs open and like just context switching again and again and again. And so we've been really focused on helping sales teams scale winning plays, figure out what plays are good plays to run, and then run those at scale. So that's across sort of website visitors, product usage. We have about 30 different third-party signal sources, but we're trying to aggregate all of those signal sources and really help you run those at scale. Because it turns out that if you show up as a human on the other side of this demand and have a really thoughtful kind of value add message, that is the best way to build pipeline.
Awesome. Thanks, Tido. And we also have Alex Kracov, who's the CEO and co-founder of Doc. And Alex was the former VP of marketing at Lattice. He was the third employee there. He helped them grow from 0 to over 50 million in revenue. Also a $3 billion valuation. They're both the $3 billion club.
Alex is also my marketing mentor because
yes.
Marketing is...
And Tito's my product mentor. So,
yeah.
Way out of my comfort zone.
And Alex is my boss, so I have to say nice things about him. Alex, can you introduce Doc and the problem that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, so Doc is trying to help revenue teams better collaborate with their customers and each other. So what I noticed when I was at Lattice, it was sort of this game of telephone where marketing was always trying to create assets for the sales team to then go share with the champion, and then the champion needs to go share with the buying team, and a lot got lost in translation in that flow as you were trying to, sell your software to another company. And so I thought there was a much better way to go about this, and that sort of inspired me to quit a good job and start Doc. And the way to think about Doc today is we really help you manage across the entire customer lifecycle. And so we built this thing called a workspace, and you can use it as a sales deal room. You can use it for customer onboarding. You can use it for account management. And it really helps you have a really premium customer experience and collect a lot of interesting data, insights, all sorts of stuff while making your team more efficient. So yeah, excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alex. And if you're wondering why Alex and Tido wanted to have this conversation, I think both Koala and Doc are making sort of complementary tools in the space of sort of like sales tech that have to do with buying signals, like understanding your buyers better to help you close more deals. We're also customers of each other. So Alex and Tido have been having a lot of sort of behind closed doors conversations, and they realized it would be fun to have these conversations out in the open. So thanks for doing this for us, guys. Just a bit of housekeeping before we jump in. So we have about 40 minutes of discussion prepared, and we've left 15 minutes at the end for questions. But feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and I'll rudely interrupt these two if I feel like it. So there's also a Q&A feature on the right if you want to make sure I really don't miss your question. But I'm sure I'll keep an eye on it. And yes, this is being recorded. We'll email the recording out tomorrow, but also if you come back later to the same link, the recording will be available on our website. So you guys ready to get going?
Let's do it.
That's good. Really hyped. So let's set the stakes for this discussion here. So we talked about AI hype when when we promoted this. So there's a lot of AI hype right now. As two founders building in the space, like where do you see AI in sales today, and like how's that market been evolving over the past year?
I can kick it off and then we'll pass it over to Tito. I think everyone is obviously super excited by the potential of this technology. I mean, I think, after you do a few ChatGPT searches, you're like, holy shit, wow, this is really cool. And then you start to think, okay, how do I apply this to my own enterprise software? And I think there's even levels deeper as you start playing around with it. You're like, oh, it can do this. Oh, it can do that. And I think everyone is sort of really scrambling to figure out the best way to use it, the best way to build it. And in some ways, I think it's in some ways like overhyped in the moment. Like people are still figuring out how do we actually take advantage of this technology, but it's really underhyped in the long term. Like I think it's going to be really transformative for the industry. And I think it's a really good time to be a startup. I'm very happy that I'm at a startup and try to build a new company in this space, because I think incumbents have a lot of tech debt and a lot of existing things that they have to deal with. And I think there's a whole new wave of startups coming that have sort of AI stuff, baked into the platform at sort of a more native level. So I don't know, those are some initial thoughts to kick it off.
Yeah, maybe I'll share a little bit. A lot of my thoughts come from the engineering background I have. We started to like kind of play with AI features for the first time maybe about 9 months ago, something like that. We were trying to do a lot of summarization of what's happening in Koala, because there's just, for some of our customers, we're collecting hundreds, thousands of data points per account. And that can be a bit much for a rep to look at. So we thought, okay, AI will be a great way to do summarization. And about 9 months ago, the models we were using, like it just wasn't that exciting. Like we were, trying, and we got to some decent summarization. We kind of hit it in a corner of the product. There's like a little button very few customers found it. We didn't make a lot of noise about it. And then fast forward to about 2 months ago, we started playing with it again. And it's just been pretty mind blowing how far the models have come in terms of like how much autonomy they're able to go do. And so obviously we're all, I think, reading on Twitter, LinkedIn, X, LinkedIn, et cetera, just about what crazy engineers are doing, which is exciting. But I think we're starting to get to a point where the models are feeling much more accessible for SaaS apps to go do really exciting things. And so I haven't released this quite yet, but we have a bunch of sort of AI agent swarms that are just really exciting. Like reps, not anyone technical, can write a query that feels a bit like a search query. And then once a rep kind of figures that out, they can run 25 of those in parallel and do really high quality research. And so just the difference of the models in less than a year is kind of mind-blowing to me. And obviously we're continuing to see that pace at the foundation model layer. And so I just think it's really starting. We had this first generation of pretty uninspiring features for most of last year. Kind of felt like toys, kind of felt like you were getting the same crapola out every single time you hit the magic button with the sparkles. But I think that's really starting to change, and I think it's starting to be a lot more accessible, not just to prompt engineers or AI engineers, but starting to be accessible to people who can like dream of some task that they have. And so I think that's why this next year is going to be really, really exciting.
And I think that's like a really important point. It's sort of moving from this world of like the engineers and the toys and the really technical folks really playing around with this technology and building it, and then moving that towards business users, right? And people who don't know how to talk about code. And I think this is the place for software, right? Like I think enterprise software becomes a place that sort of translates like all the magic and the goodness of the LLMs and the AI in the background, and then making it super accessible for business users and translating in a way to accomplish all the sort of jobs to be done as part of their everyday job. And I think it's a super exciting trend. And I think, in the future and this year and in the future, like spend is going to shift from headcount to more technology. Like I think you're going to have much smaller teams leveraging these tools to be able to do more, because each person's going to just be able to get a lot more tasks done. Like one very small example I experienced recently is I was preparing like a board deck and trying to do a bunch of stuff that I probably would need an analyst for, because I suck at doing VLOOKUPs and I suck at doing Excel and things like that. And just using AI, I was able to like build all these charts and do all the stuff and all the data manipulations I needed. And it was like transformative. And it's saved me from having to ask somebody to do something for me. So one small example.
Awesome. And Tido, you mentioned agents or agent swarms. So can you talk about, like, you've called it the year of the agents. I've seen lots of people talk about that. Can you explain what agents are and why sales teams should be paying attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so the general architecture of an LLM is you have a blob of text where you're manipulating it. You give a prompt, and then you get out another blob of text. And so the first generation of AI features, as we've been talking about over the last year, was really like a super large blob of text. Maybe you have, in our case, we have like a CRM record of all of the customer notes and a record of all of the prospect activity on the site. And you kind of put all of that together. Then you put that through like a mega prompt. So like a prompt that, has a bunch of complex instructions on what to go do. And then you get out something on the other side. And then a lot of these first generation tools was just like putting that in the UI or like making that into a chat bot because it was a little unclear what you do otherwise with that block of text. And I think that ended up being uninspiring for a couple of reasons. One is mega prompts, where you have a lot of complex tasks to go ask an AI to do. The AI will sort of just focus into like one of the tasks and come back very confidently with something a little bit random. And you're like trying to use it, you're pumped about AI, and then it's just like not doing the thing that you wanted it to do. And so I think the architecture that people are realizing that makes a lot more sense is you want much smaller components. So you want a little research agent that can do this one task of maybe summarizing this user's session. And then you might have another research agent that does this task of like looking up all of their past LinkedIn posts and, coming back with a list. And then you might have another agent that does, the same at the account level, looking for how many open jobs there are. And so agents is kind of this word for decomposing these tasks. And then you can have a bunch of lower level agents that do super simple tasks. And then maybe you bring the results of all of the lower level agents to a higher level human reasoner to go figure out what's next. Or maybe you even have another agent that has a higher level task. But this idea of decomposing the LLMs to do all of these much smaller tasks seems to be working really, really well. And I think agents is kind of the word we're all using to describe that.
And one thing I'll add when it comes to the agent conversation that we're thinking through at Doc is like, what's the best way to interact with the agent? Because I think everyone's first exposure to AI was like the chat interface, right? Where you just talk to this thing and then it does a bunch of stuff for you. But that is super intimidating to build, because if you just present this open-ended thing, then the user's expectations are, this is going to do everything for me. And so it's something that we're really thinking through as a product team of Doc is how do we make it really easy for our customers to get access to agents in a way that doesn't require us to build everything under the sun right away. And so I think increasingly, we're thinking of like buttons or like not doing the chat interface right away, where it's like maybe there's a button in the product that asks you to create an order form and send it out, right, using an agent. Or maybe we actually proactively present different content recommendations and things like that. But it's sort of trying to think through, maybe the chat interface is not the only way we're going to interact with these agents. And maybe over the long term it is, but I think as a startup trying to build in this space, it's too intimidating to say, we're going to build every agent under the sun. We sort of need to think about, okay, what are the most critical ones, and sort of weave that into our UI and our overall platform.
Yeah. One of the mental breakthroughs I had when thinking about agents in the last couple of months is like really thinking about yourself as a human doing all of these tasks and really trying to break apart, when I'm doing this task, what are all of the little subtasks I'm doing? And then really critically asking like, what subtasks should I be doing versus like, shouldn't I be doing? And a great example in our world is like a subtask an SDR probably should not be doing is listening to an entire podcast to go find like one little snippet to have like a next level point of view on how to reach out. That is something that an LLM can do for a couple of cents, which like no matter how you slice an SDR's time is just like doesn't make sense. But that is a way you can have alpha on having an incredible point of view. And so like that's like a great example of a subtask that should go to an agent. A subtask that should probably not go to an agent is like some of the finer human connection messaging details. Those are just falling like quite flat and like look quite repetitive as someone opens their inbox and has like 100 of those, and 90 of them were like kind of cookie cutter prompts, based on the same templates and just sound very robotic. So I think thinking critically about the subtasks and really pushing yourself to be like, okay, this subtask I could actually give to an agent, and you'll be very impressed a lot of the time, and disappointed some of the time.
I think that's a great transition into thinking about where AI sort of works as you go through the sales funnel. So you mentioned AI SDRs and that sort of top of funnel. I think that's the use case that most people be familiar with right now. Can you talk a little bit about, Tido, like what's the state of the AI SDR right now, and where do you see it going? And then next we'll talk like a little later down the sales funnel.
Yeah. Well, I remember when ChatGPT first launched, and then within like 24 hours, everyone was calling for like the end of the SDR function entirely. And then it was the BDR function, and then it was all of sales, like escalated within a week, like pretty quickly. And, I think it's funny to think here we are a couple of years later, and it feels like actually not that much goodness has happened there. I think that the AI SDR was sort of this dream we had, that there would be the easy button, and like you could just like load in a contact database, you could load in an account list, and you could load in some sample messaging and just like swizzle all of those things together. But it turns out that's of course not really yes, some of those are the subtasks that reps do, but that is not what makes like a rep really special. They're not like, oh, we're faster at like pulling more contacts and automating that. Maybe 10 years ago there was real alpha there because like people hadn't figured out automation and sequences, et cetera. But in this world where all of the buyers are inundated with all of this content, that's not actually the way to stand out. And so I think we're sort of seeing pulling back on AI SDRs just because they're not quite hitting the mark on this like incredibly breakthrough message at the right time, with like some really thoughtful, genuinely helpful context. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're not offering value in that outbound message, you're not going to book a meeting. And I think a lot of the AI SDRs have kind of fallen short of that promise. Obviously, there's a question of like, if they keep sort of cycling and improving and using the feedback loop to get better, is that going to get us there? I think it really depends on like the data that's going into them. And I can guarantee you that like a contact database, an account list, and a general value-based messaging framework is like not enough to get there. But obviously, I think there are real benefits you can have by automating certain parts of the SDR workflow, which is why it kind of comes back to this subtask question. So anyway, I think it was a little bit of overpromise, underdeliver. There are definitely some subtasks that have been automated, but maybe like a little too much automation and like eliding away some of the things that really make SDRs special.
Yeah, like I've been way too scared to try AI SDR stuff myself at Doc for our own outbound purposes, because I just don't trust our data quality. I don't trust that it's going to be good. And like, I don't know, it's a scary thing to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and start trying to actually use. And I think the way I see it being most helpful is like AI really just assisting the person, right? And making their life a lot easier, whether it's the, research and trying to craft a better email, different things like that. And, one AI tool that I think probably everyone on this call has played around with and is awesome is Clay. And, when I've done some outbound campaigns, we did like a cookie campaign where we sent, cookies to people's offices and follow-up emails and stuff like that. But Clay was incredibly helpful in trying to figure out the data set, enrich the data, figuring out like who was in the office or not. And like, it would have been way more work. Like when I had done a similar campaign like this at Lattice, we had a team of Upworkers doing this, and it was more expensive. And now I was able to do it with Clay. And so I think that was like one small example of how, AI was really helping me do better outbound, but it wasn't this like pure AI SDR thing. And I think like, even if AI SDR is successful and somebody figures it out, I wonder if it just kills outbound. If everyone is getting these perfect things, like, does that just kill a viable channel? Like, do we want that to actually work as an industry? I wonder. I mean, maybe it's so good that like it's the same as a human and whatever, but I don't know. I worry about the world where it's just fully automated like that.
Yeah. Well, and a big reason that phones are doing way better in outbound over last year into this year is because it is illegal there's a regulatory thing that's keeping the volume in check, because when it becomes 100x cheaper to go make volume happen, it just inundates the buyer.
And it's like fake Tido doing the call, or AI Tido. Yeah.
AI Tido, yes.
Yeah.
Kevin has a good question here. Maybe I think this is pretty related. Should we?
Yeah. So Kevin asked, so the AI has led to lots of spam. Trust is really critical with buyers, of course, and agents make bad decisions like you guys have been talking about. So how do you balance like the role of the human and AI to maintain trust with a customer? And like, how are you thinking about like human tasks versus agentic tasks?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's actually super related to the AI SDR. I would say the pocket of AI SDR that has worked a little bit better is in really large TAMs and much lower ACVs, where it's actually okay to make a mistake. But to a lot of Koala customers, they're much higher ACVs, and I think what you just said is like a pretty horrific fear I have, that you're working on like a 75K deal and then you outsource some tasks to an untrained third grade level intern who like makes mistakes, and that's like a really tough spot to be. In the Koala product, we've thought a lot about sort of human in the loop being really important. So like one of the big problems reps have today is like they have so many data sources they're being asked to go check to like run these plays. So maybe like a PLG company probably has like a sign up list, so they're looking for in ICP signups. It has like an overconsumption list that lives somewhere else. You have sort of all of your standard like pricing page visitors, technical docs visitors, like those kinds of things. And something that humans are actually pretty bad at is like going and repeatedly checking like 10 or 15 different sources and like, noting it down and remembering to do something. And so that's like perfect for an agent task or an agentic task to like go collect all of that stuff. But then once you've collected it, you've done like lots of sort of enrichment to go hopefully develop a POV. I think we're still at a point where it's a human task to go choose between these three different play strategies that all sort of like, the contact or the company is eligible for. And, we can provide information like, hey, this play tends to work the best. But really letting kind of a human in the loop complete that higher level task of like, okay, how am I going to make compelling human connection that adds value? And so I do think of that final layer as much more healthily done by humans. And then we do have some customers kind of doing a hybrid where like, for the A-fit accounts, it's all going to kind of humans and handling that with a human in the loop. And then maybe you have some like B and C fit accounts that are like doing really high intent activities, and you don't necessarily think it's worth a human's time, but you can send like a pretty low risk email that hopefully catches someone like right when they're in sort of buying consideration. And if they respond, strike up a good conversation. So definitely also like a hybrid, but I would say by and large, that last layer before it hits your prospect really should be a human reviewing, but there's just so much of the research and pulling together data and whatnot that really can be agentic.
Awesome. Andre had a question about what are you seeing in regards to the use of AI for inbound with more transactional ACVs? Like you were talking about higher value deals. What about the more transactional sales?
Yeah, I would say, what I was referring to there is AI SDR can be sort of maybe another form of like marketing automation where you're just kind of trying to do some touch points. And because the TAM is a lot bigger, maybe you're less likely to burn the TAM and there is sort of a volume play. It's still not my favorite use case, but I do think that is where AI SDRs are a little bit more powerful. Actually, the use case I like a lot more for inbound is really using AI to do a lot more enrichment. So like someone has decided to like hand raise and they're stoked to talk to you. There is probably 15, 20, 30 minutes of research that you would do in an ideal world before you like hop on the phone or maybe deflect that inbound to a self-service flow or whatever it is. AI is really making it possible to basically answer all of those qualification questions you might have at the click of a button before you even hop on the phone. And so I think some of those use cases, we actually started seeing it. We were doing an analysis for Vercel on sort of pipeline influence. And they're a customer of ours. I was trying to like compute how much outbound influence we had after our first year renewal. And I found this other use case, which was being used a lot inbound, where someone would book a demo and then a rep would kind of get in there and do a bunch of research in Koala. And basically they were just trying to prepare for calls. And so now we're starting to see that, this was 2-ish years ago. Now we're starting to see that they're able to not just like look at all of the first party intent data that's happening, but also do some of this like research that you would do if you had infinite time. So I love that use case for AI, where it can be this sort of turbocharged researcher. And I think one of the really important things is making sure you cite the sources. So all of the agents we've built will always like link out to the final source that we used to find. And so I think before you really commit to a POV or really commit in a conversation, taking 30 seconds or a minute to kind of scan over the source material of what we found. But really that 30 minutes of research can be a minute now. And I think that's like a really exciting use case for AI.
Awesome. So let's go further down the funnel. So Alex, like how do you see later in the deal, like beyond just pipeline generation, like how do you see AI helping teams close deals?
Yeah. So I think like as you move, beyond like after the demo stage, right? After you kind of have somebody interested in you, there's all sorts of things you're doing in the sales process where AI can save the team time and provide a better buyer experience. And so one of the first things that Doc launched when it comes to AI is like AI generated business cases, right? Business cases are a super important artifact as part of the sales process. It's really important to get, to create these things that you go share with your champion, then to go share with the CFO, whoever's ultimately making the buying decision. And what I found with working with a lot of sales reps is oftentimes they know they should do it, but it's kind of a pain to put together a business case. It's a lot of work. Then they got to go to Google Slides. They got to go to all these different places to kind of put it together. And so the first thing that we did in Doc when it came to AI was basically taking your call recordings and spitting out a business case on the other side. And so instead of taking this process that, probably took a couple hours, right, of like, how do I write the business case? What do I do? What do I put in here? So on and so forth. Within a few seconds, you're able to take all your gong call recordings, right, and create a business case that you share with the customer. And then I think, piggybacking on the conversation I had earlier, is like the business case that the AI produces is like 85% of the way there, right? It's like pretty close, but not exactly what you want necessarily. It's not perfect. And so, I think where the magic of it is within Doc is like we can get you started, and then you have all of Doc's editing capabilities for you to add things into it, right? And make the adjustments you need, or add in a piece of content or things like that. So I think business cases are a big one. Another one is like around mutual action planning, right? Same sort of concept, right? Listening to your calls, creating mutual action plans, updating them for you. That's another thing, we've built within Doc. And as you sort of move throughout the funnel, I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities here. Something on our roadmap that we're working to build is like, how do we recommend content better, right? All the things that are happening across the sales cycle, maybe we can listen to a call and they're talking about a competitor and we suggest the rep that they should send over this competitive battle card or something like that. And so, I look at the sales process as a bunch of these like key moments and places where AI can make your team more efficient. And so they sort of follow the best practices. And as we've been playing around with it, I think what's become very clear is that organizations will want their own custom prompts. And so, we built our own business case prompt, for example, where, we kind of outlined the 3 or 4 sections were in there. And then we started sharing with customers like, wait, can we add this thing? Can we add that thing? We'd like to do this ROI analysis that way. And so something we're working on is like, how can we create sort of like custom prompt library, right? And templates where we can get you started and help you to like translate AI to the business user, but then also you can build it and manipulate it in a way that really fits your sales process in your organization. So I think there's some really interesting things happening in that world.
One thread I just want to pull a little that Alex was talking about that I think is a really important point. A lot of the framing of AI is time savings. So the value prop is like, oh, okay, we're going to take an hour and make it a minute. Even I was saying that earlier. But I think Alex said a really important point, which is often reps don't actually do the thing. So they don't make the mutual action plan, or they don't build the business case at, nearly to the level of customization it should be. And so it's this interesting thing, because there's this repetitive task that's so boring to go do, or in our world, maybe an SDR isn't actually bothering to go get an incredible POV that has like a breakout kind of message. So even though AI is replacing the work, it actually leads to better conversion outcomes. Like, of course, you're going to have a better conversion outcome if you send an amazing message to generate pipeline. You're going to have a better conversion outcome if you build a really amazing, thoughtful business case. And so I think AI, though, is often like human replacement time is like the literal thing that's happening. You can really ladder it up to like really important business outcomes, like increasing pipeline conversion.
Yeah, 100%, right? It's like all we care about at the end of the day is like, how can we increase our close rate? How can we get more pipeline? All those different things. And like the efficiency is the mean to the end, right? Like, and so, and I think of it as how can we create this better buyer experience, right? At the end of the day, right? And how can we help our sellers do that? Because the really cool thing about like AI and the business case example, as we're just talking about it, is I can take a seller first day on the job who knows nothing about the product, they can use AI to create a perfect business case for a customer, right? Because they don't need to know, they don't need to write it, they don't need to think about it themselves. And so you can really onboard people much faster, get them to closing revenue much faster. And it's like one of the, I think, the most amazing things about this feature.
Yeah. So speaking of closing deals, and let's talk about buying signals. So Alex, you've talked a lot about before, like why the opportunity stages in a CRM aren't enough for a team to do proper deal forecasting. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I always thought forecasting calls were funny. I used to sit on them a lot at Lattice, where it was basically like, okay, we analyze, all the different deal stages, and they have all their different probabilities, right? And then we try and take it at word. And then it's really a test of like quizzing either the sales manager or the rep. Like, is this real? Is this actually going to come in? And it's a lot of this like fake magic, right? Of like, is this forecast going to come in? It's like a vibe check almost. And I think Gong has done some really interesting things in Clary, right, to improve forecasting and give visibility there. And they hook up to your, emails and calls and things like that. I think there's a lot of good signals, but I think there's a whole other class of signals that kind of get lost in translation when it comes to forecasting. And this is where sales deal rooms, I think, are just transformative for the industry, because within a sales deal room, you're able to track everything that the user is clicking on, how engaged they are, whether they're, viewing the deal room over and over again. We have found that like if someone's viewing it again and again and again, they're actually engaged. If they're not looking at it at all, they're probably ghosting you, and you got to follow up. And then you're able to get better insights, whether, okay, they're checking on this, your competitor analysis or competitor battle card. Maybe you should follow up with them to get a sense of like, maybe you're in a competitive deal that you didn't know about, and that's going to inform your forecast. Or maybe your champion said they passed the business case along to the CFO, but they didn't actually. And with something like a deal room, you're able to get a buying signal where you can actually tell if the CFO actually read the business case or viewed the sales proposal, right? And a lot of these were like these blind spots previously, where you would have to deal on sort of like everyone's word, right? The sales rep is trusting the champion, and then the manager is trusting the sales rep, and the CRO is trusting the sales manager. But now you basically have, sort of a real-time activity feed of everything that's going on in the deal. And I think it just makes, adds so much more character and richness to each of the stages within, opportunities. So that's kind of more middle, bottom of the funnel stuff. I know I use Koala all the time for buying signals at the top of the funnel. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Tido.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. I feel like pipeline generation is obviously so critical. It's like a top 3 issue, if not a top 1 issue for pretty much every CRO and organization. I think what we found is like the data has been sort of like kind of cobbled together across an organization, especially a more mature organization. But it's just so like all over the place. You got your like couple reps who like know about this like one, looker report that has like monthly overages. And so they're kind of like making a killing over there. And then you have like another rep who like knows about champion movement, and like they're making a killing over there. And so you end up with this like there's a lot of buying signals. There's almost like too many buying signals in like too many places across an organization. So I think that's been an interesting one to me, where like getting like the right volume of like super well enriched leads with a super thoughtful POV about like what this means about where they are in the buying cycle. Like I think that's the nirvana that folks are after, because And I think this is, in some sense, is the opportunity, tying to our prior conversation, this is the opportunity of AI. Like AI is really happy to go look at like all of the data sources, in real time or near real time. It's happy to like help with like machine learning ranking about like, okay, well, given everything that has happened here, we think like out of these 100 leads, these 10 accounts look like they're really the most ready to enter a buying conversation. Then you can do sort of, 30, 60 minutes of like custom research at the click of a button to kind of further refine that point of view. And then you can have like a smart human kind of step in at that point and do, 30 minutes, an hour of like really meaningful pipeline generation activity. And they're already sort of using the aggregate knowledge of all of the buying signals you have under your four walls. Plus they're using like the enrichment, this custom enrichment that really hasn't been possible until the last year or so, and really stand out with something awesome. It still takes a lot of work. Like I hop on calls with prospects all the time, and I would love to like give them the easy button, this AI SDR that just like does all the things, and then you just click it, and then pipeline just comes. But I think it's not the reality. I think the reality is you can use AI to pull together all of these buying signals, like rank the buying signals, enrich the crap out of like the accounts. But at the end of the day, there still is that, making a human connection and really that adding value. And I think humans are like insanely good at thinking about how they can add value to a situation if they have all of that context. But that's what I'm really excited about. I think like the buying signal, like unification and kind of getting it in one place that a rep, like their mind is not spinning around is really important, because there are so many companies we talk to that have 15 different plays already, are thinking of adding 5 new plays. And like every time they add a play, it's like 4 hours of sales enablement. And obviously like the uptick on the incremental 16th play is not what they would like it to be.
Let's shift the discussion just for the next 10 minutes before we get to Q&A. I'd love to, you're both founders of sales tech companies, so I'd love to know a little more about that. So you were both like early executives at successful companies. Now you're in the founder seat. What's been the surprising part of being a founder at a sales technology company that you didn't expect? I'll start with you, Alex.
So I definitely thought it would be way more similar than it is. I remember sitting, because I was the third employee at Lattice. So I saw Jack, who was a CEO. I was there as he was sort of making all these different decisions. And so I was like, okay, I get what this is. Like, it's going to be exactly the same. And in some ways, it's been obviously that experience of growing Lattice has made Doc much easier for me. But I think what's been really surprising is like, honestly, the emotional and like mental burden of being a founder, where it's like every decision relies on you, is just so different. Like when I was at Lattice, like if there was a product decision, a financing decision, whatever, something outside of marketing, I could always be like, here's my 2 cents, but Jack, you make the decision. And I think now it's like, I have to make all the decisions, and it feels existential, right? And you really have to like make the right ones, or there's people on the line, right? Your employees, your customers. And so I think mentally has been really, really different, and you get used to it. But I think that was definitely a shock. I think the other thing has been, I've built up a ton of empathy for other functions across a company. And honestly, marketing now at Doc is like the easy thing that I don't spend too much time on, because whereas at Lattice, that was like so much about, I was trying to learn how to be a really better marketer. And so, I have like so much empathy for all the stuff that sales and customer success and even operations and billing and all those, functions go through, because I'm doing a lot of that, at different times myself at Doc. And then the last thing I'll say is I think the funnest part has been product. Like I have learned a ton about how to, be a product manager, and how do you work with engineers and translate designs into reality. And it's so rewarding to kind of see like these little ideas come to life, and then have people use it and like it and things like that. It's also a really humbling experience too, because then it's your idea and you build it, and then people don't figure it out. You really got to learn and iterate and make it happen. But product has been really fun for me to work on.
Cool. I can hop in. I think the thing that's been funny for me is just selling into RevTech. I feel like a complete outsider as like a software engineer background, engineering leader, and then at Segment, there was a little bit of the Segment product we sold to marketing and growth, but like really the bread and butter sale was a developer sale. I think it's really interesting when you're selling to developers, like, you get crucified if you like forward sell it all and like, you don't have technical docs and an onboarding flow and a way to use the thing right now. And so that's been very much my worldview, which is just like, okay, we got to like have everything ironed out and everything good to go before we start talking about it. And, of course, I think like a sales leader or marketing leader buying software, like really wants to understand not just where things are today. Obviously, the current capabilities are important, but they want to understand the vision, the North Star, the beliefs about the world. So that has been an opportunity for me that I'm still growing into as a founder. But I think that's been maybe the most interesting thing about Rev Tech in particular. And then, I would heartily agree with a lot of what Alex was saying about, there's just a lot of random tasks at a company. Like every time a employee joins, there's just all of the setup stuff that you never think about that, at Segment was layers and layers abstracted away from me. That exists in HR, that exists in billing, collections, that exists in finance, basic operations. So just this long list of things that you would never think about in 100 years, but you just spend a lot of time as the catcher of all tasks doing those things. So that resonated a lot. And then, definitely the emotional roller coaster. I mean, you'll close the deal and it'll be your biggest deal ever. And you'll be like on cloud 9 for about 15 minutes. And then you're going to like get back to the ground and then think about all of the things that need to be going better. Like we haven't hired this role yet, or this function needs like a bunch of guidance, or we haven't figured out how to do this yet. And so I think, keeping this hope and optimism in spite of the impossible mountain you're climbing up is just it's a really tricky, fun, but tricky kind of emotional roller coaster.
And Alex, Tido talked about the challenge of selling to sales teams. Like, what have you found? What have you learned so far at Doc selling into sales?
Yeah, sales is such an interesting persona to sell into, and it's very different than HR, which was kind of the last persona that I had dealt with. I think one of the funny things with sales, or there's a few things. There's like pros and cons, right? Let's start on the pro side. I think one, like they respect the game. So if I can craft a really good outbound email, oftentimes the response I'll get from like an AE is not like necessarily they're going to go buy Doc or whatever, but they're like, hey, I just want to respond because this is a really good email, like respect. And then I can like try and weasel my way into like a buying conversation from there. But I always find that really, really funny. And then the nice thing is that we're really close to revenue and making an impact, right? And so if we can really prove that Doc, drives close rates, for example, it's a no-brainer solution. Whereas if, in HR, it's maybe looked at more as like a cost center, if you will, something like that. And so being close to revenue, there's more budget, and that's like really exciting. I think on the con side, I think because sales reps, especially like the account execs, know how sales process work, I've encountered a lot of, I'll call fake champions, where you get on a call, they'll tell you, hey, I'm going to help you multi-thread. I'm going to set up a mutual action plan. We'll do blah, 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 and meet with these people. And like, they know how to talk about the sales process, which is very funny. And it's also a pro when you get a good one, but there's a lot of fake ones. And then what happens is I think they just get easily distracted, right? They get distracted with their own work. They get distracted trying to close, revenue for the quarter. And that's all totally good. Like that's their main job. So it's this interesting thing of you deal with, I think, a lot of like what I call fake champions who get distracted and they're not quite willing. They're not like mature software buyers, right? They're not willing to do the setup work or they don't have the pull within the organization to like actually lead to a purchase. So the bottoms up sale is tricky, and it works sometimes. Like we've closed a bunch of revenue that way, but there's a lot of like, you have to separate the signal from the noise there.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to give people a chance to ask questions in the chat. We have a couple outstanding questions. I have more questions for you guys too, but just so you guys know, feel free to drop questions in the chat there. Kevin had a question about on the product building side, like how you're thinking about designing human in the loop experiences as you build AI into your products.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things I'm most excited about for our roadmap for 2025. So I'll hop in. I think like Clay, Alex mentioned an absolutely incredible tool. A lot of the worldview of Clay is like, hey, well, let's do all of this enrichment, and we'll kind of put it in the CRM or in the tool. Usually CRM. I guess, as like the kind of final resting place of this data. And I think, you can have a human in the loop experience with a CRM. Obviously they're using a CRM, but then you're getting into sort of like all of the CRM list building, reporting, et cetera. And I think like one of the places we're seeing falling short here is like, if you have an AI agent, or agent swarm that's gone and done 25 different tasks for you, and then you see something that catches your eye and you want to like double click into that task, and then that catches your eye even more and you want to like check your source so that you can actually go send the email, without a kind of full-fledged UI and product experience around the second half of that, you can't actually quite leverage AI correctly. And so I think, for vertical SaaS apps building on top of foundation models, that's a huge opportunity because there is actually a lot of experience. You might be checking in several times with the foundation model through the workflow. We call this progressive disclosure. So we give you a little bit of information. If something catches your eye, we give you more information, and then we finally link you to the source. So I would say a lot of the product design that we're doing right now, and really the kind of more classical like SaaS product building work, is thinking about this new magical tool you have at the foundation layer that you can kind of leverage, but you still have like a lot of like product UI UX to think about to really drive scaled value. Or another example of that is like we've found that when people start adding agents to the agent swarm, usually RevOps will kind of set up the initial one, but then reps will start adding their own agents, which is like super exciting, right? They have this idea of this thing that they want to run, and then one rep adds it, all of the other reps benefit, and then you need like a quality control system. So like which agents are actually being used and useful, which ones are not, and like hallucinating. And so I think a lot of the software layer is actually thinking about all of those product experiences that happen after. And I think a lot of the value that we Koala can provide or another SaaS vendor can provide is really thinking about those kind of end user human in the loop workflows. And I think it's something that's going to be challenging for teams to build in-house if they're just, loading an enriched, a cool custom enrichment data set into like a more stagnant home, like a CRM that doesn't have sort of like all of the rest of the workflow figured out. So I think it is hard. I think that is, hopefully where folks will turn to SaaS solutions that can really like have thought a lot about what these right workflows are. But yeah, I agree. Super hard, and definitely something we're thinking a lot about. It's a very different paradigm as well.
Yeah, huge plus one. Like I think it was funny when AI agent stuff was first coming out and you saw it on X and LinkedIn, like everyone's like the death of software, SaaS is going away. And I think it's like the exact opposite. I mean, I think as you said, UIs are still super important. Like we're visual creatures. We don't all just make phone calls all day, right? And like I don't think there's going to be necessarily this world of just purely just agents talking to each other like out in the internet outside of a UI. Like I think we're visual creatures. We like to see things. And again, going back to this idea of like humans are still the editor, right? And so the AI is going to create something, and then the human's going to come in and sort of edit it and fine tune it, and then it gets shipped to the customer. And within that world, you need a place to like show what's happening, show what you're creating with the AI. And so I definitely don't think like UI and software experiences like that are going away. There's going to be supercharged by like some AI magic dust, if you will.
Awesome. Matthew had a question for you, Alex, about deal rooms and selling to engineers. Like, do you find that engineering teams will go into deal rooms and engage with them too?
So I don't think your average engineer is really going to love a deal room, I would say, to be just very honest. Like I think when I even think about my co-founder, right? Like they just want to get into, they want to start hacking around. They want to look at the API documentation and things like that. But at bigger organizations when you're building, technical resources, right? And then there's a broader team around the engineer, right? Engineering leadership, product managers, designers, right? That's when a deal room becomes, I think, much more valuable when you're selling to like a technical audience. And there are things within a deal room that you can do that are more appealing for like a technical persona. Oftentimes when you're working with those, you're doing some sort of like proof of concept, right? They're starting to play around with the API, then they're building something, then there's like a review period. And that is like a perfect use case for, something like a deal room, because it's a place where you can share the documentation, align on next steps, showcase the results and things like that. And so when you're maybe working with a bigger buying team on the technical side, that's when a deal run becomes most important. But if you're working with just like a single engineer, just send them the API docs and they'll start messing around with it.
Awesome. Matthew said he appreciates the candid response. Tido, your team uses Doc. I'm going to put you on the spot. And your ICP is RevOps sales teams. Have your customers reacted to their Doc workspaces?
Yeah, I feel if I were to pitch Doc, I would just say we're having a lot of messy email threads. And I think there gets to be before Doc, there gets to be a point in a sales cycle where you will start to have messy email threads where there's just a lot going on. I mean, assuming we're talking a real deal, with a reasonable ACV, not a self-service transaction. And I think that point starts to get a little bit unwieldy, where it's kind of a bad experience for both parties. It's a bad experience for the buyer because there's this 37 long email thread that has some helpful links buried somewhere in emails 1 through 4, but you kind of keep going back there. And it's a bad experience for the seller because you're not getting any feedback. Well, you're missing some of the organization you'd like to have, but you're also not getting a feedback loop on what's happening on the other side of the deal room, which is super critical, kind of lower in funnel buyer signals to have. So the way I would think about it is we do have deals where it's less important because we're just doing something a lot more transactional. It would be, 3 to 5 email long thread and you're not losing track of stuff. And, we still like it there, but I wouldn't say it's nearly as transformative as opposed to the, 50, 75, 100K deal that is just going to have a lot more people in it. That thread's going to get a lot messier. And you're going to need to onboard from scratch, a bunch of people late in the process to think through why this is happening, and asking them to go parse this really long email thread for links is not the move. Obviously, before Doc, we were doing a lot of let's hop on a call and walk you through the whole presentation for 15, 20 minutes so that we can get you, the new stakeholder, on board. And I think Doc has just streamlined a lot of that for us. My favorite feature is definitely when a deal we thought was dead comes back to life because there is activity in the Doc room. But I do think structurally it's been really helpful for just complex buying processes. And email, works, but it's just not really well suited for that complexity.
Awesome. Kevin asked, what are some of your favorite AI tools to support selling outside of Clay, if any?
Well, I have stuff. I don't have specific tools I'm going to name, but I have a bunch of jobs to be done that I'm excited about. I think in general, call recordings are just amazing treasure troves of data. So I think the more you're looking at call recordings and thinking how can we take 50 call recordings and come up with a new potential homepage messaging is a really interesting use case. Oh, okay, maybe I'll name one tool. Octave is really focused on this, and I'm really stoked about what they're doing. I think it's just a lot of very raw data that humans just wouldn't go do. But you can take all of that raw data and turn it into competitive battle cards. You can turn it into homepage copy. You can turn it into sort of sales coaching. But that is just a really rich set of data that I think people should be thinking about. And the other one I'm excited about, I have less specific tools here, but I think just sales coaching in general, it's so high stakes when you get on a call with someone. And so the more folks can be practicing cold calls and practicing different scenarios in much lower stakes, I think it's a really powerful tool there because I think it's close enough to talking to a human that you can really make meaningful coaching strides in what you're doing. So those two classes are what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think the AI role play stuff is super, super interesting. At Lattice, when we would launch new products, we would always do these certification demos where I would sit in a room and try to role play with the reps. And I think it's super interesting to kind of do that via AI. I think is super interesting. And I'm super excited for Koala's roadmap, to be honest. I think where Koala has been transformative Doc, and like you have all of the data, right? And so I think there's all this super interesting stuff that you'll be able to put and layer these agents and the summarization on top, because like before Koala, we tried to use just HubSpot to kind of track all of our product activity. And it just gets so stale so quickly. Like we would have just one field where it's like last activity in the product. And it didn't really tell the whole story. And then we started to use Koala, and we're a product-led company. And so there's a lot of stuff going on in the product of what they're clicking on, what templates they're using, what pages they're visiting, what products they're using, so on and so forth. And with Koala, it's like almost a new type of CRM. We're able to visualize all the stuff that's going on in there, and then obviously connect that to the different plays. And so I like totally see, and that's why I bought the tool. I'm a big believer in what you're building, is like I totally see this world of, okay, you know, you have that data layer. How do we sort of layer on top all these like AI summarization and different agents for plays and things like that? And I think it's also helpful, not just, I know today has been all about sales, but for customer success too. Like we use Koala to see like disengaged customers or super engaged customers. And so I think there's a whole world for plays, not just on the sales side, but on the post sales and account management side. And I think what's really important for big organizations, because most of the revenue at a big organization is coming from your customer base, not at new business. And so I think there's just tons of super interesting opportunities there, and it's going to be a fun year.
I'm stoked for it. Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I think it's funny. When we first started, we didn't really have enough data sources that reps were overwhelmed. And at some point last year, I think we hit this tipping point where all of these new data sources coming in, and also having like much larger customers that were just ingesting like insane amounts of data. It's really paved a good path for our product roadmap of like, oh, okay, well, we got to start figuring out how to take these thousands of data points and really turn it into something meaningful and actionable for a sales rep to go do.
Awesome. So we're at time. Thanks so much, Tido and Alex, and everyone who joined today, and anyone watching the recording later. People who are here live, we will email you the recording, and Alex is also going to send you an example doc workspace, so you can check that out. And I'm sure Tido's team will be great sales follow-up people as well. So
we'll try. We'll try.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, folks. It's great to see you all
Thanks,
here.
everyone. Appreciate
Thank you.
the conversation.